Welcome to Group 8's Dungeon Guide of the Ruby Life Pools. You can find this dungeon on the southeast corner of the Waking Shores. This entire dungeon requires medium to heavy movement from the trash to the bosses, so if you can, be sure to choose your talents that keeps you mobile and dodging swirls. In my series, I'm going to be using a term called priority abilities. This is the focal ability of the encounter, and the one that other abilities revolve around, or it's just the most dangerous one. I'll be doing a Mythic Plus trash guide in a later video, so stay tuned for that. And remember, this is just the beta. Many things can and have changed, so I'll be doing a final review and edit before launch. First up is Meladrusa Chillworm. Now she has a variety of abilities that center around the priority ability, Primal Chill. Primal Chill is a stacking debuff that lasts for 10 seconds and reduces movement speed by 3% per stack. At 10 stacks on Heroic, it will freeze you for 3 seconds and deal 3000 damage per second, but on Mythic you actually get frozen at 5 stacks that last for 7 seconds, and you take 17,000 damage every second. Now this debuff is applied anytime you take damage from her frost abilities, which happens to be almost every ability except for one, so stay on your toes. Around the room, you'll see clutches of eggs that you've seen along the path to her. At 66% and 33%, Meladrusa will release one section of these whelps. On lower difficulties, this isn't such a big deal as they die pretty quickly, but on higher difficulties, you're going to want to time this, as getting a section of whelps released at the same time as a chill storm could spell a wipe. These absolutely need to be CC'd and AoE down, as each whelp hits for 10,000 on Mythic and gives a stack of Primal Chill. These are not to be tanked, as you'll be frozen almost instantly. Chillstorm is going to be a group wiper if not positioned carefully. After a few seconds of casting, Meladrusa targets one player, and a few seconds later the debuff will drop and a storm will be centered at that player's location. This storm will try to pull you in. On normal difficulty you could just walk out of it, but on higher difficulties you may have to use a speed boost. On Mythic difficulty, the Chillstorm inflicts 15,000 frost damage every second to all players standing within it, so if you can't get out immediately, you still have time, but eventually the stacking movement speed debuff will make it so that you can't leave without an ability. This Tempest will last for 8 seconds, each second throwing a hail bomb towards players. When the storm is done, it will explode, dealing 16,000 damage to each player inside the storm and tossing a hail of bombs scattered at the players, dealing 24,000 damage to any player within 5 yards and giving 2 stacks of Primal Chill. There are 2 abilities the tank needs to watch out for, one of which needs to be positioned carefully, but both need to be mitigated. The tank's job here is actually just to take as little stacks as possible, which Meladrusa will try to make difficult with hail bombs and whelps. Meladrusa will cast an ability called Ice Blast that deals 80,000 frost damage on Mythic in a frontal cone, and anyone hit by this will also have 5 stacks of Primal Chill applied. So you're automatically taking half the stacks you need to get frozen from this alone in Heroic, and it will instantly freeze you on Mythic. Now you can see why tank positioning here is so important. Her other tank buster is Frigid Shard. This is the only physical damage in the fight, but it hits for a whopping 108,000 damage to her current target, so needless to say this needs to be mitigated as well, and you may need to coordinate healer cooldowns depending on your class. Next up is Kokia Blazehoof, who is actually sporting a red tint of the Mythic Shaman tier set. Her fight is a lot simpler and has some medium movement, but this is still not melee friendly in my opinion. Kokia's fight is based around her energy bar, which fills up at its own set rate. Once this reaches 100%, she will summon an orange swirl near a player's location, which will deal 72,000 fire damage to all players within 12 yards after a few seconds. A blaze-bound firestorm will spawn from this explosion that needs to be focused and downed quickly. Not killing this quickly enough will leave Kokia to summon a second firestorm before you've dealt with the first, so the firestorm is definitely the priority ability here. Its first ability is an uninterruptible 2.5 second cast called Inferno. This will deal 91,000 fire damage to all players and 10,000 damage every 2 seconds for 6 seconds after that. This may be a bit healing intensive with everything else going on, so help your healer out and try to use health potions and defensives. Roaring Blaze is its interruptible spell that will blast all players for 25,000 fire damage. The Firestorm will just chain cast this until it's interrupted, so catch it on the first cast. After you've killed the Firestorm, as all respectable fire elementals should do, it goes out with a bang. When its health reaches 0, instead of dying, it will cast Burnout. This is a 20-yard area to run from, and after only a few seconds will explode for 91,000 fire damage to all players who weren't fast enough. On Mythic difficulty, this will also leave a 2-minute scorched zone that deals 28,000 fire damage a second, and you can't really control where the firestorm will spawn unless you all group up, but be prepared to move for Molten Boulder. Periodically, Kokia will turn to a player and cast Molten Boulder in front of her, which will have a red swirl effect on the ground. After a couple of seconds, the boulder will fall on that spot, dealing 64,000 fire damage to any players who touched it, knocking them back and stunning them for 3 seconds. After the boulder lands, it will roll forward for 40 yards and explode for 97,000 fire damage to all players within 12 yards, and on Mythic difficulty, this also leaves a Scorched Earth for 2 minutes. Her last, but certainly not least ability is Searing Blows. Tanks and healers will want to keep an eye out for this as she strikes her target 4 times over 3 seconds, dealing an increasing 100% weapon damage and applying Searing Wounds with each strike. Searing Wounds will apply a bleed to her target for 6,000 physical damage every 1 second for 4 seconds, and it does stack. And if your name is Ryu, then you just die to this and tank the floor. Lastly is a 2-boss fight between a troll named Urquhart Stormbane and his dragon Kuraka, whose abilities do mesh together. Kuraka will start the fight in the air, spitting flames on the ground that need to be dodged, while Urquhart takes us on directly. Occasionally, Kuraka will come down with her own abilities and go back into the sky. When either of these bosses reach 50% health, Urquhart will mount his dragon. The priority ability in this fight is Inner Inferno. This will ignite any player struck by her fire abilities for only 1,600 fire damage every half second for 2 seconds. This effect begins at 2 stacks and increases in duration for each stack after that, so literally standing out of the fire is the focus of this fight. In addition to your ticking dot, every 1 second players with Inner Inferno will explode, harming only other players for 14,000 fire damage within 5 yards and leaving behind a flame ember. These embers explode moments later, charring the ground for 25 seconds or 35 seconds on Heroic, 45 seconds on Mythic, so you need to run and spread these around if you get it, but be careful not to box in your group because of Stormbane's Change of Winds ability. Players who also stand in flame embers will take 7,000 fire damage every half second and apply Inner Inferno. Kuraka has a pretty basic ability called Flame Spit, which just spits fire on the ground and inflicts 28,000 fire damage to targeted players, inflicting them with Inner Inferno. Her third and last ability is Roaring Fire Breath. This is a frontal cone channel that deals 7,000 fire damage every second for 6 seconds, which, you guessed it, applies Inner Inferno if you're hit. We're starting to see a pattern here. Now let's get to Urquhart. Winds of Change conjures a localized hurricane, dealing 1,400 nature damage every 1 second for 4 seconds or 3 seconds on Mythic. This also slowly pushes players and Kuraka's flame embers in that direction, and the direction will change each time he casts it. Similar to an enhancement shaman, but just a little bit more dangerous, he'll use Storm Slam against tanks, which is a massive blow, dealing 105,000 physical damage and 39,000 nature damage on Heroic. On Mythic, this will slap for 129,000 physical damage and 48,000 nature damage, but this will also give the tank a debuff, increasing nature damage taken by 100% for 30 seconds, and this does stack. His last ability is Cloudburst. On normal and heroic, Cloudburst will release a wave of air that hits all players for 13,000 nature damage after a short cast. On Mythic, this changes to Interrupting Cloudburst, hitting players for 16,000 nature damage, but it also interrupts and silences players that got hit while casting for 4 seconds. Once you've achieved rating 101 and have mastered standing out of the fire, the ruby life pools will be saved, thanks to you. If you found this video helpful, please give this video a like, check out my other Dragonflight dungeon videos, subscribe and hit that bell if you want to be notified when my other dungeon videos are available. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next guide. Knocking them back and stunning them for 3 seconds. The boulder lands, it will roll forward for 40 years. I almost said Jesus Christ. Her fight is a lot simpler, but still has some medium movement. Kokia's fight is Next up is Kokia Blazehoof, who's actually sporting a red tint of the Mythic Shaman tier set. Her fight is a lot simpler, but still has some medium. I don't know. I just delete this and put this here. Just because for some reason my brain can't handle the fact that movement is on the next line down. So just put them next to each other and we'll be good to go. That'll resolve that. There are two tanks. There are two tanks. I hope not. Once you've achieved rating a 101 and have masters standing out of the fire, the ruby life pools will be saved, thanks to you. Oh, this microphone's really sensitive.